Hello, hello. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to give about 30 seconds or so to let everyone get joined here, and we will get started. Again, welcome to the webinar. Good to see everyone that's joining. We've got some great information today talking about compliance, and the clock is ticking here for FTC safeguards. And are you ready? And everything there is compliant. Let me just do a quick introduction of why everybody's joining here. My name is Will Nobles. I am the CEO here at Vector Choice. And on with me today, I have John DePerro, my Chief Compliance Officer. John, thank you so much for being on with us today.
My pleasure, Will. Look forward to talking to everybody.
And I hope you can educate all of us and everybody listening. What is FTC safeguards? How does it affect different businesses out there? And answer any of the questions. And that being said, guys, if you have questions, please put in the Q&A. Love to hear any questions that you guys have. We'll be monitoring the chat as well. But I'm going to go and get started here. So today we are talking with John DePerro, our Chief Compliance Officer, about FTC safeguards, but a little bit about Vector Choice. I've got an honor to work with a great team, and I say work with because they actually make this happen. We've had the honor to be in the Inc. 5000 multiple times. I got a chance to be a Type 100 of the top 100 CEOs in the state of Georgia. MSP 501, which is the top 501 managed services providers in the world. We've ranked there in the past 6 years. So my team is killing it, but I wanted to give kudos there. We're all over the place. We do business everywhere. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, but our corporate office is in Lubbock, Texas. We have offices all the way from Philadelphia, all the way around to Texas, and clients throughout multiple states and countries that we can serve you and help you with your IT compliance and cybersecurity needs there. So let me jump right straight into it, John. Let's talk about what clock is ticking and are they compliant? And anybody on this call, are you actually meeting compliance? And let's just kick off. What is FTC compliance in the first place?
Well, FTC, of course, we're talking about the federal government, big federal agency that manages trade, right? Typically, they oversee non-SEC regulated financial institutions. So they came out with the safeguards rule, which actually I'm getting ahead of us now. So I'm going to hit the slide there. We get into, there we go. The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act is actually old. It's not new, right? But they keep amending it, changing it. This is the federal law that regulates financial institutions. It also defines what a financial institution is. And I think if you see the federal government's definition of what a financial institution is way broader than what the average normal human being would consider. You think banks, you think, private equity firms, but we're going to learn today just how many things the federal government considers to be a regulated financial institution.
I see definitely a lot more. Just what I've learned through and listening to you, John, definitely a lot more than you would think. So let's talk about where FTC safeguard rules. What is the safeguard aspect of
safeguard specifically is the FTC's efforts to protect consumers' non-public consumer information, right? So nickel version, if it's information you wouldn't get out of the phone book or out of public records, that would be non-public. Your personal email address, it could be your social security number, it could be all kinds of things that are non-public. There's a whole category of it, right? And
who's covered by it?
That's a great question. It's a massive list. I understand we're talking really CPAs and folks today. So first off, if you're not an SEC regulated institution, right? So if we got anybody here who's calling in from IBM or somebody, you're run by the SEC, all your publicly traded stocks and all that, that's different. So we're looking at the rest of the country here. There are dozens of categories of what they consider to be a financial institution. What it essentially comes down to is whether you're financial in nature, like a financial advisor would be a slam dunk, right? Or you're incidental to such financial activities. Like if you print checks, normally what people wouldn't think about, I actually live catty corner from a commercial printing, a big factory that does mailers and everything. They make checks, they print checks. You wouldn't think of that printing company as a financial institution, right? But because they print checks, they are absolutely covered as a financial institution. So it's a broad, broad, broad definition. How do you know? That's a great question. Um, with the exception of saying, read the book, which, you can send me what business you're in, and I'll send you the exact paragraph and line number from the federal law to see if it applies to you. Um, But let's go over a couple, like a litmus test here on the next slide of a couple things for people that may be on this call to help them figure out if this applies to them, right?
John, I got a quick question here.
Yep.
What is there a website that sort of a dummy website that just lists the companies that or the industries that are covered under that?
No. So industry by industry, I've seen websites like the American American Association of CPAs, AICPA, I believe that they have their website that talks all about it. Car dealers are specifically listed. So the North American Dealership Association, they have their website. Like, so it's very industry by industry where they educate people in their industry of why this applies to them. But I've never seen a single website that just says, here's the entire exhausted list. Because the list is huge, right? It's this incidental to such financial activities. That's the caveat that is catching a lot of people off guard. Go ahead and hit the next slide. I'll kind of show you how they break that down into some specific examples. So specific examples listed in the Code of Federal Regulations are accountant or other tax preparation services that is a business of completing income tax returns, right? I don't know too many accountants that don't touch people's tax returns, right? I'm sure there's some niche boutique ones, and don't just think people, could be business. It's about getting the accounts for the IRS, getting the accounts, all the taxpayer information. A common misunderstanding is who we're trying to protect. We're not trying to protect the company. We're not trying to protect the accountant's corporate clients. It's about the non-public consumer information. So if you're doing taxes for a company that has 100 employees and you have all their tax information for those employees, you're charged to be taking the right steps to protect that data. If that makes sense.
So John, if someone is and I know there's some accounting firms that strictly do bookkeeping accounting for small businesses, but they don't really do the tax returns. But they might have access to the tax returns. If they're not doing the filing but have access to the data, do they have to be FTC safeguard?
So it's a pretty nuanced question, and I'm not going to say it depends. The key word here is preparation. It doesn't say filing. Nowhere here does it say complete file 360, the whole thing, right? I mean, if you're helping to prepare them, right, or complete the tax returns, I would argue there's a very, very high chance that this applies to you, right? But businesses that wire transfer money to and from consumers. Nobody thinks about the company that just takes wire payments as a down payment or form payment because I sell, expensive boats and ski-doo equipment, and I do all this stuff. Well, if you provide or arrange for financing, if you take wire transfers to or from, no one thinks of the company that rents, boats down at the dock as a financial company. But if you arrange for financing, if you wire transfer money, you're a financial institution to the FTC. It's an extremely broad-reaching rule, right? And it's weird how sometimes they're super specific. An automotive dealership, they wanted to eliminate any ambiguity. Like if you're an auto dealer, this applies to you. And it's funny how many times I talk to automotive dealers like, well, we don't think it applies to us because we don't wire transfer. I'm like, it literally says automotive dealerships. Full stop. End of story, right? And there's they talk about career counselors. They talk about all these amazing subcategories that people would never consider to be financial institutions. But according to the federal government, you absolutely are. And if you want that full list, if you want to understand why lawyers define it, there it is in 12 CFR 225.86, specifically Delta 1.
So, and when you talk about mortgage broker, and I came, my background, before I started Vector Choice, I was the IT vice president of technology at a mortgage company. So there is retail and wholesale mortgages, mortgage companies. Is it specific to that, or is it just anybody that's transacting that type of financials for a consumer? It would apply to. Is that correct, John?
So mortgages can come from different, well, it come from different places, right?
Yep.
So it's not so much the mortgage underwriter that they specify because they're already covered actually under other laws. Mortgage brokers are the one who've been lumped into this now because the mortgage brokers historically would say, well, hey, I'm not a mortgage company. I just take your app and shop it across a couple and off you go, right? Those mortgage brokers are now absolutely covered, specifically listed as one of the types of companies covered, just to remove that ambiguity, right?
Yep. And guys, if you want any questions, feel free to pop it in the chat for John. And John, I'm going to throw a wrinkle here, and you might not know how to answer this, but is a closing attorney for mortgages, would they fall under that? Because they do take the wires, the wire transfers, and they're holding an escrow.
Well, the attorney doesn't usually hold that.
Oh, true.
Yeah. So here's a problem with compliance, guys. Every question is answered with "it depends," followed by 45 minutes of chat. Okay, so this is the problem with the compliance world. All right. So, and I hate saying it depends because that doesn't do anything for you. What I would say is if you have a very nuanced, specific application, let's talk. Shoot me your question. Let's schedule a call and I will come prepared with every regulation. And it's never just one, right? Like we talk about the tax preparers. You got the CFR that specifies what you have to do to be a tax preparer from the FTC's point of view. But you also have an IRS publication that you have to attest that you're doing certain cybersecurity things in order to get your e-file account. So there's usually more than one thing anyways. So I hate to say it depends. Send me your specific problem and I will pull all the relevant facts and data and we'll have a call about it. Is that fair?
That works for me. So John, let's talk about the standards that sort of everybody has to go by when dealing with FTC safeguards.
So there's about 24 specified things that the FTC is telling you. It is a minimum in order to protect non-public consumer information. The Information Security Program, or they call the Written Information Security Program, has a couple key elements underneath it. These are all subtasks that they put in there. One is you have to have a qualified individual managing it, okay? Georgia Tech, Will's down in Georgia, not today, but normally. Well, hell, not even normally, but his wife and family are in Georgia. Georgia Tech is currently facing a multi-billion-dollar fraud act charge because the people who were supposed to be qualified to manage their information security program for a federal grant they received had no idea what they were doing, filled out paperwork incorrectly, submitted it to the federal government, and now they're facing their literal criminal prosecution. Not even a fine. That might come. It will come. But they're literally facing, a state college is facing federal criminal prosecution by choosing people who are not qualified to manage their program. So the FTC is getting specifically vague, right? They're going to say, you're going to designate a qualified individual. Well, what makes someone qualified? We're not going to tell you. The jury will tell you if you're right in the lawsuit, right? So we can help you with some qualifying questions to ask. You can ask, what is their background? It's like a job interview, right? If I was interviewing Will to be my qualified individual, why do you know what you're talking about? How long have you been doing this? How many clients do you do it for? Have you ever been through an audit with a company like mine? You just like any other job interview, are they qualified? And if you reach out to me, I can give you some lists of some acronyms you can ask about, things like CISM and all these acronyms that don't mean anything to us normal humans. I can tell you like what to look for. You have to do risk
And John, when you talk about the qualified individual, in a lot of cases, I see the owner puts their self or the office manager or
That's the one.
or
Yeah.
whatever, right?
It's never the
And
owner. They're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna flick this booger as far away from me as possible." And you're right.
yeah,
It's always the poor office manager, right?
yep. And
Um,
guys, and we're always here to educate on these webinars, but I do want to put a plug here that if you don't have someone qualified or you don't have that right, we can do a fractional, what's called a CISO or Chief Security Officer that we can put as a fractional in place for you. We have two options for that. We have sort of a standard and a custom option, depending on how big you are or how much you're going to need. It's very cost effective for you guys to put that in. You'd rather have that in and have a qualified person to check that checkbox than you doing it and end up like Georgia Tech. So, John, sorry about that.
no
That was
worries.
my sales pitch for the call. I tried not to, but there's my sales pitch.
So I think the FTC looked at other things the federal government has done, kind of like HIPAA, and said, well, what has worked and what has not worked? One thing that doesn't work with HIPAA is it's always that office manager. The same lady who just schedules your appointment also manages vendor security for health information. Like it's way outside their their training. So it's got to be qualified. You have to do risk assessments. Right. You have to understand what data you have, how it's at risk, and have and an actual plan to take care of it, which would be the access control, right? Access control is simply how are we controlling who gets to that non-public information? We obviously don't want to put it all up on a website for the whole world to see. But if we lock it down so no one can use it, maybe we can't get our actual job done. So there's somewhere in the middle where it's secure, but it's also functional for our company. That has to be articulated and done properly. Identify and manage the data, the people, systems, everything. A lot of people, unfortunately, and you know, you've seen me do this with business. I go in, I say, where's all your sensitive or confidential data? What they don't even know, they've never even made a list. They don't even know what's sensitive to them, right? Right. And then we start go through, we have a questionnaire we do to kind of draw this all out, and people are stunned at how much data they have that needs protected, right? So if you don't know what you have, you clearly don't know where it is. You don't know who's using it and how it's protected. So that's, and it's across mobile devices. It's across, you know, people think, oh yeah, I back up my Microsoft every night. So we're good. We got backups and it's encrypted and the world is good. And you find out that they're doing all their actual work on QuickBooks and that computer, none of it's backed up, right? That one computer, the backups are in the same place as the primary. So you got to have a better partner to help you manage this. If you don't have them,
John, you know, obviously, you know, Internet of Things or bringing your own device type, especially after 2020 and COVID, a lot of people moved to having people work from their personal machines to work on data, you know, clients' data and stuff like that, or mobile devices or tablets. Where is that risk comes in for the business owner of allowing, you know, are you out of compliance if you're allowing and not protecting those machines that are home use machines or personal machines?
so I will say this, hope is free, but it's not a plan. If you have a plan that says, my plan is to go to the big box store and buy a home edition computer and have the guys at the counter manage all my security for me and hope nothing happens, that's fine. That's a technique, right? There's a fundamental difference between the commercial version of software and products and the home recreational, if you will, version. There's a huge difference between devices that you bought and now there it is, and devices that are managed, whether you're by yourself, by your IT guy, or another company. The biggest challenge small companies are going to have is if these rules are written by people who work in the federal government with unlimited budgets, and they are sent off to places like Ernst & Young who have unlimited budgets and tons of people, and you know that's great for the enterprise companies and Ernst & Young. It's very hard for small businesses to do all this stuff and go about running their business well. They don't know the questions to ask. And you know, it's funny, when we talk about CPAs, why don't companies just do their own accounting? It's a skill set they don't have. Right? I mean, and maybe you start with, for those of you who don't know Will too well, he started Vector Choice. It was just Will, like, hi, I'm all of Vector Choice, like 18 years ago or whatever, right? Now we're bigger. We have accountants, we have salespeople, we have engineers, like we're a fuller company. IT is no different than this with the CPAs. You're a one-man shop, you kind of got to figure it all out on your own. But as you grow, you have to bring in experts who are better at their job than you are at their job, who have the time to do their job right while you go do your job. Will tell you all the time. I get mad. I yell at him all the time. Get off this call. It's not a CEO level call. We got this. Go do something CEO level. Let us run the business. Same thing with information security. You have to have that qualified individual who's going to take this by the reins and address all these things that you don't even know need addressed, which gets back to encryption. We talk about my computer, my laptop, but what about your smartphone that receives emails? What about your watch, right? How much stuff can you send to your watch before it becomes a problem, right? Like, what would be your IoT devices, right? Your Alexas and all this stuff. How much of that needs to be protected and how much is an acceptable risk? You need someone who actually knows how to map this out. Secure development is the same thing. We're going to skip that one for now because that basically means, in a nutshell for this audience, you can't just go buy tools because it was the cheapest one. You kind of want to make sure that, if you're buying a software tool part, a vendor, that software was developed in a secure way. MFA is multi-factor authentication. I think by this point, most people know that this thing exists. Where people get confused is they think because I have MFA to get to my laptop, everything else in the world, I now can say I have MFA for it. It's not how that works, right? If you're using QuickBooks Online, and please, people, I love QuickBooks. I'm not disparaging. Don't call QuickBooks and tell them to sue me. Great company, great product. They just have local versions and they have cloud versions, right? So when you go tell your insurance company and FTC that I use MFA to access all critical data and you don't have it turned on for QuickBooks, then you were lying. The fact you had it turned on for your computer is great, but you need to have it turned on for access to the data. Again, you're not going to know these nuanced, detailed questions without that qualified individual. Secure disposal. What have you done with old data, old laptops, old phones, old files? Secure disposal doesn't mean I threw it away and I'm pretty sure nothing bad will happen, right? There's an actual DoD instruction that the rest of the world follows, not just the US, on how you securely dispose of digital information. Change management's a big one. Before we make a change, we adjust all the things it could affect. Review retention policy. So how do we know when it's time to dispose of data? Different states have different laws saying how long you're required to keep data, right? I'm engaged in a pre-litigation issue right now, and a linchpin of why we're probably going to get a favorable settlement prior to even going to court is the builder, it's a home builder on the other side, they're required by state law to have 10 years worth of construction records. And they got ransomware and they just throw it all away, buy new computers. And we're specifically doing records requests for things that they don't have. And the court is not happy with them. State law says you have to keep that for 10 years. This is only 4 or 5 year old problem. Give us the records. And their excuse is, well, we got ransomware. We don't have them. Court doesn't care. So monitor and log. Now we have all these security tools in place. How do you know they're working? How do you know they're turned on all the time? How do you know that nobody's gone in and switched it off, right? Testing is another part. How do we know it's working? Whether it's a penetration test. Penetration test means without any guilty knowledge or insider information, I'm going to try and bypass your security, right? That's different than a vulnerability assessment where maybe I do have guilty knowledge, maybe I am on the inside, and I just want to see, based on the threats of the world, how is our organization vulnerable to those specific threats? In fact, vulnerability assessment is kind of good that I have inside knowledge. Penetration tests, I want to not have inside knowledge, right?
John, are they required a certain amount of times a year or yearly or annually or whatever, or every 5 years to do a penetration test and a vulnerability assessment with FTC safeguards?
The answer is yes. And like all compliance questions, it depends. But the simple answer is yes.
Yep.
Okay. Training. Are your people getting phishing training, security training, all this stuff? And then your service providers. This is one that gets overlooked a lot. You don't get to just say, here's all my customers' information that they gave to me and they trusted to me. And the company that runs my website got hacked and now it's all gone. But don't blame me, it was the website company. Yeah, but you hired them. You're the one that's told your customers it's safe to use this website and put all your data, your credit application, or upload your receipts or whatever you're doing. You don't get to just go to court and blame the company you hired to run your website. It's your website, right? Or your credit card or your cloud-based client management portal, whatever it is. You don't get to just blame your vendors. That ship has sailed, it's gone. The courts don't want to hear it. The insurance companies don't want to hear it. And candidly, you think of any of the big cybersecurity breaches that the average normal human can think of. Sony and Target and, all these big ones, right? Almost all of them had a vendor that was actually responsible, but nobody knows it, right? You all heard about the Target breach, right? Anybody know how it actually happened? No, I do. It was a vendor, but no one, that's not the vibe. That's not the public opinion. No one cares it was your vendor. Target got breached. That's what's in the news. Don't
And
sue.
I think John, taking that down to even a smaller company. I know Target, we're talking about a big company there, but taking down, I think it's a reputation that I think that you've got to be concerned with in your community, in your city or your state, that you've got to worry about as a
Oh, we got
smaller.
a slide for that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's like coming. Oh, that's a very good segue. In fact, it's coming up quick, actually. Um, so I think we'd be kind of beat some of that stuff to death. That the nickel version of all this stuff is this incident response plan. If something bad happens, do you have a plan? Remember, hope is free, but it's not a plan. What are you going to do when you get hacked? Well, we'll figure it out then. That's not a plan, right? Having it written incident response plan ahead of time. And then your qualified individual, and you can tell this is obviously written for bigger companies, right? Your qualified individual who's going to manage your information security program has to report annually to your board of directors in writing, right?
So
And
there is
the
like
reason for
everything.
that
Yeah.
was a lot of big boards, and these are big companies that drive these changes. Would you try to throw the IT guy under the bus and say, well, we never said, we never approved, hey, we don't come after the board. We didn't know about it. So they're trying to make that. So, but here's exceptions. So a common thing I hear, especially from CPAs for some reason, CPAs are the biggest people I hear this from. They say, well, I have less than 5,000 customers, so I don't have to do any of this. This is verbatim, guys, copy paste what 314.4 says. This is not John's paraphrasing or anything. This is the law in front of you. If your financial institution that maintains client information concerning fewer than 5,000 customers, then these these 4 sections don't apply to you. And when you break down what these paragraphs are in the law, this is what it means. Your pen test and vulnerability assessments, you're exempted from. The written incident response plan, you're exempted from. And your qualified individual does not have to report in writing to the board. Okay.
And John, my understanding on the 5,000 consumers. So let's take a company that is maybe a CPA firm has that company doing taxes for that company, and that company has 100 employees. Would that be considered 100 consumers for that CPA? Because they have one client, because they have access to multiple Social Security information of different consumers, not the client.
It's about not the number of consumers, not the number of accounts you manage, not the number of bill payers. Does that make sense? It's the number of consumers. But if you are one-man CPA shop and you only have one customer who's just a private individual, and he happens to just be the richest guy in town and hires you to be his full-time CPA, everything but these 4 items still apply to you. They still apply to you. Compliance doesn't scale down well. It doesn't, right? Well, if I go to Ernst and Young and say, hey, you have to have a qualified individual, they're like, are you kidding me? We've got like 1,000 of them. And they probably do, right? It's very hard to meet today and tomorrow's security and compliance challenges for small businesses. It is a literal existential threat to many small businesses because they have not been protecting information and investing in security. So now the world is forcing them. I say it's a threat. What happened?
I'm sorry. Yeah, John. So if I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I'm thinking, what if I'm not compliant? Is the compliance police going to come arrest me? I mean, what if I'm not compliant?
So compliance is just another risk. And this is probably the most controversial thing I say. For someone who does compliance for a living, right? This always surprises people. Compliance is just another risk. You're a business owner, business is risk. You choose the appropriate insurance level, you choose who to hire. There's risk decisions made by business owners all the time. This is another one of them. The difference is, as a business owner, you probably understand the pros and cons of renting a truck or leasing a truck versus buying one, or, you can make good business decisions about other things. When it comes to cybersecurity compliance, most people fundamentally don't understand the risk that they're assuming. So what happens if you're not compliant? The compliance police statistically are not going to come after you. The oldest cybersecurity federal enforceable rule we have is probably HIPAA. It's 35 years old. HIPAA is not new. Everybody knows what HIPAA is. HIPAA has specific things that you're required to do, and Health and Human Services nationally issues probably around 30 fines a year. Nationally, right? The FTC has not issued any fines, right? So what is the risk? Okay, great. Forget the FTC. They don't enforce anything. I'm out. The FTC is not your problem. The class action lawsuits coming from breaches are changing. The lawyers are learning faster than anybody else how to monetize your bad risk decision. The difference between negligence and accidents will happen is when you knew better and chose to not do it, right? We have a law. It is very specific, whether you agree with it or not. It covers a lot of people. Industries are talking about it. CPA websites, car dealership website, everybody in different verticals is talking about it. And unfortunately, your absence of knowledge of the law is not an affirmative defense. You don't get to go to court and say, well, I didn't know how to figure out the laws for my business and then follow them. That's not how that works, right? You're supposed to know what taxes to pay and know what laws to follow. So when you are not following a law and an industry standard in your industry, that's a federal requirement, it's very, very easy to make a negligence class action suit. So here's what is most likely to happen to a company who ignores FTC safeguards is if you have a business impacting event, an incident, it's going to turn into a class action suit. So you talk about reputational damage. That's one of the best forms of pressure in these lawsuits is to create media stir or to be willing. I'll put in there like the one we're doing right now. One of the concessions we're doing to get more money and better resolution in this lawsuit I'm working on is a non-disclosure. We'll agree to not tell the whole world what you messed up, but you're going to settle on our terms quickly, right? Why? Because we know, and the lawyers know, that's a huge reputation damage, could be long-term more painful to you than the money we're going to get out of you today. So the reputation damage is massive. When it comes to regulated industries like being a CPA, in Ohio, you have a board that permits you to be a CPA in Ohio. You have to be registered with the state. They are very clear and black and white. If you don't follow the applicable laws, rules, and regulations, they will pull your license. So you're risking your professional license. And I'm going to make a big disclosure before I say the last thing. I'm not an insurance agent. I'm not offering insurance advice or selling insurance products. That's recorded, right? I'm not an insurance guy. But let me tell you another aspect a lot of people don't understand when they look at the risk. You cannot insure against illegal activities and fraud. You can't. It's against the law. It's not enforceable. When you fill out your insurance application, your directors and officers, your E&O, all these different policies, they have trap language in them. They almost always ask, are you following the laws, rules, and regulations? And everyone clicks yes. This is one you're not following, right? Insurance companies, when you have a business impacting event and you file an insurance claim, Will, you're a business owner. If you have to file an insurance claim, what's your definition of success? Getting paid quick, right?
Yep.
What's the insurance company's definition of success?
Not paying you.
Well, I mean, we're polar opposites here, right? They're going to find a reason to not pay you. And when you fill out an application that says you follow all the laws, rules, and regulations in your industry, and they find one that you're not even close to following, right? And the linchpin to me, the biggest one to me is that qualified individual, right? Well, I know how to get a printer to print and I can change the ink on myself. I guess I'm qualified to run information security. They're going to crush you over it, right? So I wouldn't statistically and from a risk management point of view, I wouldn't worry about the compliance police, as you put it, right? Federal government's slow, goes after big targets. If the federal government's going to investigate a company and find them, it's going to be a massive Fortune 500 company. It's not going to be normally small companies. But the lawyers will. And once there's a big lawsuit that's in the news, sometimes local state governments and credentialing boards feel compelled to act to make it, now they can't not do anything, right? So is this a huge problem today? It's a problem. I can point to lawsuit after lawsuit that this is happening. But I think in the next year or two, you're going to see that it's going to be almost impossible for you to properly insure your company without these things in place. I think you're going to see, if you sell business to business, your good clients, the ones you want, are not going to be signing new contracts with you if you can't demonstrate that you're going to protect their data, right? I think this is the year to at least come up with a plan. I'm not saying go spend 300 grand, although, we will take your check. I'm not saying go spend 300 grand this year on every security tool some guy can name. I would tell you 2024 is the year to have a detailed plan about what you're going to do over the next 2-3 years, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And guys, I know we've covered a lot today, and we're not here to sell you on this call. We're not here to scare you. I know a lot of stuff that he said was a little scary from a business owner standpoint and risk mitigation and risk acceptance there. But if you want to reach out and have a call with John, scan the QR code here. I'm going to put in the chat, the link in the chat as well, so you guys can access that. I think my team just did that for you. So schedule a time with John, talk to John about where you're at in business. If you have any additional questions that we covered, if you don't want to do that, you can obviously email, reach out to us, info@thevectorchoice.com, or just give us a call. Love to help you, love to talk to you. We've got different products from a compliance as a service standpoint, security as a service, and having that key person be responsible to even taking care of your day-to-day IT needs as well. Guys, thank you so much for being on. John, thank you for educating us and being on today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Wonderful afternoon.